Hello, welcome to episode number 5. It's been a while since we did a video, and I think I've got a good little list of some things to cover that have been coming up a lot lately. Some little tricks and a little bit of basic setup tips and ideas. So one of the things that seems to be coming up a lot now with the Storm truck release is the springs coming off of the spring cups and getting all crooked or whatever, because we run like a really low ride height on there. So when the suspension extends all the way, the spring has some movement in there. Something that we've done for a long time, not even since the Storm's been out, is we'll take the spring, okay, and I'll just give it a little pinch here on this last coil that sits on the spring cup. Okay, that's a little bit better, but let's do it a little bit more here. Something like that, okay? And then when you put your spring on your shock, when you build it and that sort of thing, that's it. I just do a little pinch like that. Make sure it's sitting down nice and flat. And that's it. That spring won't ever come off, that cup won't ever come off of there. Piece of cake. That's it. So when your suspension extends all the way, the spring will stay attached to the cup. It won't ever come off. So this was kind of a thing that I've always done anyway, just because years ago with the shallow cups where they didn't have these little fingers in the rear, it seemed like if you got in a collision, the cup would fly off the car and it would be on the track. So that's obviously hard to finish a race like that. So that's a quick, easy one right there. Bam, spring's done, fixed. You won't lose another one of those. Second thing was some questions that have been coming up about the vertical ball stud caster blocks that we make now. So the stock caster blocks, oh, I got one right here actually. So obviously you're familiar, the stock caster blocks have minimal adjustment there, just a little bit of length is all. But what we found is, you know, most of the time we're running this outside hole, so there's no adjustment on the roll center on the outside. With the stock hubs, there's only adjustment on the inside, and we can't really go down any further. We have experimented with using the captured ends without a washer, putting it right on the carbon. So what that accomplishes is you're going to start increasing the angle of this link. So what that does is it creates more side grip, or more grip when the car's rolling onto that corner of the car. So that's one way to do it. It's not very hard, and there's only about 1 millimeter of adjustment, so it's effective to a degree. So when I designed the vertical ball studs, caster blocks, so if you put the ball straight down on here, no washers, that's the same height as the stock caster block on the outside hole. So you can go from there and start raising this link and gaining more corner entry steering. When the weight transfers onto the front of the car, that'll give you more entry steering. So the theory behind this is that it's based off of a much older theory. So if you take two examples of this camber link, let's say you had one that sat up and a 1/2 inch higher, inside and outside, straight up 1/2 inch higher. That higher link, the taller link, will create more grip than one that's lower. So if we took and lowered this a half an inch down here, it's going to have minimal effect on the suspension. Okay, so my idea is that we could move both of these. So you could add washers out here and in here, and you could really tune and play with the front end to get a good feel. So the vertical caster block just kind of opens up that door where you can start playing with more adjustments here, more roll center adjustments. I like about a 1 millimeter washer out here typically. That'll give me a bit more bite into the corner. So play with that. Play with 0 or 1, or you can even start playing in the inside, moving the whole link up, and kind of feel how that changes the car. So with that being said, with links, so like we said here, we're going to raise this to gain entry corner steering. It's going to create more grip out here. It's basically the same thing on the rear of the car. So if you do the same thing and start making more angle with this camber link, you're going to create more side grip. Okay, forward grip, it doesn't change it a whole lot, but it changes when the car rolls on that corner of the car. So a typical dirt setup like I have here is 0 washers. So I've got this inner as low as it'll go. The outer, we typically run in the 3rd hole, and there's no vertical adjustment, but we're up relatively high because my links actually rub on the wheels a little bit. So those have been Dremeled a little bit. So this link out here is pretty much as high as we can go. So this is as high as we can go. This is about as low as we can go. So this would have maximum side grip, a setting on it. Now when we run carpet, that's when we'll run the other arm, or the other camber link mount here, that has 3 millimeters of washer built into it. So you put the ball stud on that mount and you're already at +3. So when you start raising this link up, you start creating less side grip. You start to introduce slide into the rear of the car, which is good on carpet. I mean, the faster you can get around the corner and free the car up, you know, the faster your lap times will be. So that's what we do with the links. It's basically just side grip. In my opinion, the length of the link has more to do with the forward grip. So it'll rotate faster. Like if you went shorter here, 1 hole, the rear of the car will rotate really fast. But it's more for forward grip in my opinion. So if you went really long all the way out on the hub here and all the way in on here, maximum link length, you'd have a lot of grip in the rear. It would be hard to turn the car, especially like in the mid corner area, like in the middle of the corner, it really wouldn't want to turn. So that's basic stuff. Basic setup, links and angles. Those are all things that are easy to try at the track, and you can play with them and go right back out and run again, you know, and instantly feel the difference in the car. So hubs, same thing. So a shorter hub, let's talk about Wheelbase all together, because the -5 chassis is very common for Schumacher cars as an option part to swap to, and it shortens the overall wheelbase by 5 millimeters. So a longer car is more stable. So imagine this, trying to park a school bus at a Walmart. It'll make big, long, round turns, okay? And then let's jump in a smart car. You could do 100, you know, U-turns in a parking lot at Walmart with a smart car. Same thing. So, you know, turning radius of the car is going to be smaller. So therefore, it's going to be a little quicker to react. And the weight distribution changes just a little bit because the car is shorter. So it's going to make the car have a little bit more grip overall. So if we had a 6-foot long car and all the weight was in the center, it wouldn't have much grip at all. So that's where we get the weights is pushed together a little bit, so it's more equally distributed, so you'll have a little bit more rear grip. The front will probably grab a little bit more too, because the weight's going to be in a smaller area. That's a couple of basic setup things. We can talk about shock angles really quick. That's fairly simple. So anytime you're laying the shock down, you're gaining more grip. So it makes the car a little bit softer initially than if the shock was stood straight up. So laying the car down adds more grip. It takes a little bit of response out of the car. So comparatively speaking, if you had these stood all the way out to the outside, the car is really going to want to react to any steering input that you give. It'll jump further, it'll land better, definitely land better, because the shocks will be a little bit stiffer just from a leverage standpoint. So what's common on the truck right now is we'll run the shocks stood up in the front and laid down in the rear. So laid down in the rear will make sure that you have maximum rear side grip, and then stood up in the front will make the front end stiff, so it doesn't really react harshly or quickly. It'll take the initial set, but after that the aggressiveness is gone out of the suspension, so it kind of makes it a little bit easier to drive. So that's a thing to try on the truck. I know a lot of guys say it's got a ton of steering, which it does, but it can be tuned to a degree. You know, I'm running mine on dirt here. I've actually built it a different way when I built the production kit and wanted to take all the steering out of it right off the bench. So I changed some setup stuff that I ran from the prototype and went out to the track, and it actually pushed really bad. So, you know, there's settings, and there's 100 ways to skin a cat on these. So some of those real basic things can keep you from getting too far lost on the setup. And they're fun to try at the track. You know, change the links, change the shocks, and really pay attention to what it does, you know, jumping wise, and if that gain is going to help you on one part of the track but hurt you on every other part of the track. So I like to look at my lap times and try to pinpoint a spot that's like the worst part on the track for me and try to improve it on that. So whether it's a bump or a turn or a jump, whatever that weakest part is, try to figure that spot out and make that better. So, all right, we covered some of that stuff. Another thing with setup that is kind of a pet peeve is when somebody posts their setup and then you go look at it, and you try 2, 3, 4 different things that are on that setup, but not the whole setup. So if you're coming from carpet and you go snag somebody's dirt setup, but you only do half of it, guess what? I'm going to guarantee you're only going to get half the results, or half of the, you know, the ability of that setup to work. It's a little bit kind of annoying when people say, yeah, I'm running this setup. Well, what are you running in the shocks? Well, I'm still running my carpet shocks. Okay, well, it's not going to work unless you use the whole setup. There's a reason why the whole setup was developed and thought to be good enough to put on a setup sheet and put out there for people to use. So it's the whole combination, okay? And then consistency, like consistently checking your ride height, your camber, almost every single run. Pretty much every run I'll do that. And the reason why it's critical is because when the car lands a little off or hits something, or another car hits you, things move around. You know, ball cups and stuff, they move around when they get hit. Also, a big thing with ride height is you can change tires and change your ride height by 4 millimeters or more. And that's a huge thing. Ride height is huge. The higher grip you go, the more critical it is. So, you know, when you're down around 14 millimeters on a two-wheel drive, it's pretty critical to make sure it's at 14 there. If it falls down to 12, your car's going to start smacking jumps and it's not going to drive right. It's going to drive different all of a sudden. So ride height and camber pretty much every run. So another thing is some of the weight that we run. So my car's set up for dirt right now. The only brass that I have is the arm mount in the front here. That's it. I don't run any in the front at all because it's going to put the big old mishandle on the car on dirt. There's not enough grip to dictate to run the brass in the front, just back here. And the reason why we run it back here is to add some forward bite. So on dirt, with the mid-motor cars, I think pretty much every manufacturer runs this arm mount brass now. So that's pretty common. I never run the rear one. It creates too much swing weight back here. So it kind of counteracts this one here. So if you're running that one on the back, you're counteracting the weight up here and you're kind of making it have some high speed instability in the rear. It'll loosen the rear of the car up high speeds. So I never run that one, never run any up here. So for carpet, of course, we want to try and get as much weight forward as we can. It increases corner speed and it frees up the rear, which helps with the corner speed too. So on carpet, basically all you're always doing is trying to get rid of grip to free the car up, because if the car's bound down with so much grip it won't rotate and turn through the corners, you're going to turn slow lap times. Once you can get the car freed up, it makes the car easier to drive, it's faster, it's more consistent. So that's why we run a lot of weight in the carpet and AstroTurf too. So on carpet, a lot of times we'll run that brass radial plate, the 76, 78, I believe it is. We'll run that. Sometimes we'll run the 4999 under servo weight, and we'll pretty much always run the Trish bit shin splitter up here. So you'll cut the bumper and then you'll bolt on the brass weight up here. That one's really good because it's as far forward as possible and it's as low as possible. So that one has the biggest, most positive effect on carpet and Astro. I run it on Astro also. So, and then also we'll take the battery, like say from a dirt position back here, we'll move it 20 plus millimeters forward, up as far as we can pretty much. So we'll take, like the dirt car typically has a 60-40 weight balance right around there. And we'll take the carpet up to maybe a 50-50 or even maybe just a little bit forward. It just helps the car with all that grip. So there's a few real basic things. Axles are a very simple tuning option. We'll run the CVA style axle on dirt. These create more forward grip. On power, they bind up a little bit more and you get a little bit more pop for the lower grip. On the high grip carpet stuff, we'll run the universal joints, and that helps free the car up also. They don't bind up on power, so the suspension is free to move, and it also helps in the corner speed a little bit. So those are some basics, real basic. One last thing that I wanted to do is show a little trick that we've used for years to get out stripped screws. So if you race RC for any length of time, you're going to strip a screw, no question, just the way it is. So what we'll do, let me pull off this wing because I don't want to completely taco my wing here. I'll show you what I do, and I keep this little tool in my toolbox all the time, and nobody knows really what it's for just by casually glancing at it. but once they use it, they go buy one. This thing's so awesome. So this one is made by Mac Tools, whatever. CP50. These are everywhere. Harbor Freight's got them. You could probably freaking find them at Walmart or whatever. So what this is a spring-loaded center punch for center punching something that you want to drill. So this will make a nice little hole, and then you run your drill bit in. But I use this to remove and loosen strip screws, or locked in, Loctite screws, you name it. I've never found a screw in racing 8-scale nitro, 10-scale electric, you name it, for as long as I've been racing, that this thing won't take out, period. It just, it does it. It's got a little bit of impact to it, which I think is like the key. It like smacks the screw and breaks it loose for you. Okay, so I'm gonna tighten one of these screws and purposefully strip it. Okay. And that's going into the metal, the brass. So that's clearly stripped. No problem. I have zero worries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right on the edge of the screw and just push. Okay, hear that? That's the impact. That's what makes it happen. So I'm just going to go around and just kind of smack this thing right on the screw. I'll show you what the screw looks like here. Okay, right there. So now you can see it's got 4 little center punches in it, basically. See if I can do this without messing up the camera shot. So I'll go in those screw holes. Right there. It's totally loosened up now. See if I have even just enough bite. Yep, just look at that. Just like that. Come right out. So I'll show you the screw head. So you can see it's got a few little punches all the way around it, and then I just picked one, and then I start hitting it at an angle to unscrew it, and using the impact in the little spring punch. Piece of cake. Works every stinking time. So this is so much easier to have in your toolbox to get screws out, rather than a Dremel and a cutoff wheel and a slot and a flathead screwdriver. And I've seen that even fail. That's what we used to do years ago before we found these things, was we would Dremel a slot and then use a screwdriver. But, you know, you probably got a 50% chance of failing at that too, because the slot's not very strong. So pick one of these up. Doesn't even have to be a Mac or anything like that. I think they're all essentially the same, as long as it's got the spring punch ability. And this tip, this thing smacked out a bunch of screws and it's still good and real sharp. So that's what I've always done for screws. Give it a shot. Pick up one of these. They work on buttons, they work on countersunks. Seems like the countersunks is where we really lose the screws on the bottom, especially like back here where they get all ground off. But yeah, this thing never fails. Literally never fails. Works super good, and all your buddies will want one after that, or they'll just come borrow yours. Either way. But okay, well, that was it. Just a simple little quick one, a little quickie. Gotta have a quickie once in a while. So we'll do another video here in a little bit, depending on how much time we have and what kind of subjects we need. So yeah, if you would, please like, subscribe, share the video, post it up on social media. Some little simple little tricks and stuff to kind of save your brain damage. Let's save our brains for racing and not banging our head against the wall on cars trying to get screws out. Okay, man, we'll see you guys later. Stay safe.